person is a recent graduate from IIT Delhi and works as a full stack developer in Standard Chartered Bank. He's fond of working with new technologies and has extensively worked on microservices. Offline, he plays chess and Casio and keeps himself up to date with the stock market. In this session today, he's going to throw some light and share his thoughts on the value stream mapping of onboarding process. Everybody, without much further ado, we present to you Mr. Mukhar Jain.
It's a pleasure for me to present in this DevOps Summit 2022. I am Mukhar Jain and I graduated from IIT Delhi in 2021 and I am working as a full stack developer in Standard Chartered Bank. I will be presenting on the topic of value stream mapping of the onboarding process. In this topic and talk, we'll touch upon the topics of micro front-end, microservices, and how they can be used to streamline the data flow and the delivery to the market of the application. Now, giving you the background of the process. So at present, the onboarding goes through 5 stages, which is the initiate onboarding, gather and modify prospect data, perform identity and verification, and signatures. So the first step is to gather the minimal data required to initiate the onboarding. I'll touch upon this in the next slide. So we'll have a talk as a comparative between the previous pipeline timelines and the new pipeline timelines, which we have after the involvement of micro frontend and microservices. So current state process analysis is as a customer gives us the basic information to initiate the onboarding. Using that basic information, we initiate the onboarding and we move on to the next stage, wherein gather the detailed information of that entity. And this detailed information gathering is done through online application of the bank. Now, once this application is gathered, we move on to the next step, which is the identity verification and data verification. Now, as we all know, in financial institutions, this is one of the most important steps wherein without it, we cannot proceed further. So this process is a manual process wherein the data which the user have filled is verified manually by the internal employees of the organization. And once this data is actually tallied from other sources as well, and upon successful verification of the data, the onboarding is moved on to the next step. So the next step is the paper and wet signatures. Now, I'll just highlight on both these paper terms as this process is manual. So paper and wet signature means that for every document which needs signing, they need to be printed and signed and scanned and uploaded back. So this again is a manual process, and we have also mentioned the wait time which this process is having currently, which is of 2 weeks. Once the signing and paper signatures are done, the prospect is moved to the next stage, which is the final step. And upon this step, the application is processed internally and soon the onboarding is completed. Now, moving on to the technical part of the discussion, wherein the first one was the gather, modify, prospect data. So I'll just give a brief info of what it is. Our application, where the user enters the data and modifies it, is deployed as a widget in a different application. Now, this another application had a deployment cycle of 6 weeks, and we had hard dependency on this application. So for any changes which we need to make in our applications, we need to wait for 6 weeks to lead it to market. Now, I'll just give an information about micro front-end here. So now I'll be telling the definition. Like first, let's say, what is micro front-end? Micro front-end architecture is an architectural style wherein independent deliverable front-end applications are composed into a greater whole. So that was the definition which I was reading. In simple terms, micro front-end is a portion of a web page, and I would highlight that it's not the entire page. Okay, so before we dive deeper into micro front-end, let me just tell what a monolith is. So a monolith, as the name suggests, is a large stone or a large chunk, something like that. In our case, it could be the full front end and back end combined. It could be the front end itself, or it could be the back end itself, which is we can call a monolith. Now, with micro front end architecture, wherein every module is deployed separately, this dependency on our different application was curbed. This curbing of dependency resulted us in a higher speed to market. So if I just give you numbers from 6 weeks, we brought down this speed to market to less than a day, which was about 97% improvement in the efficiency of this stage of the onboarding. So now let's just focus on the benefits of micro frontend. So micro frontend is very similar as the name suggests. A front end split into small parts which are delivered to the client based on as per the requirement. So one of the benefit of micro front end is the team scalability. Multiple teams can work independently to contribute on the multiple systems. This allowed us to divide the work and scale it through multiple teams. That's one benefit. Second one is the single responsibility. This by single responsibility, we mean that a single team is responsible for their small part of the application. They are responsible for the end-to-end uptime as well as development for that application. The third one is the reusability of code. Yep, we are able to use code in multiple places. One component which is built and deployed can be used by others as well, and it improves the efficiency of the coding. Now, the one of the important benefit which I would like to highlight is micro front-end architecture is independent of the technology. Now, we can use the components from different technologies as in JavaScript, React, Vue, Angular, and we don't need to worry about the deploying and building of these applications. One of the biggest challenges in front-end development which we have faced is the advancement in technologies, which requires organizations to completely and continuously refactor the front ends. Now, with micro front end, this issue is resolved. Now, what we can do is we can keep using the older frameworks and only refactor and build the newer micro front ends. So this has helped save organizations a huge amount of money in preventing the refactoring of the old code to the new one. And the last benefit which I would like to highlight is that any new engineer which joins a team, it's easier to learn a smaller apps than to understand a monolith with 1,000 lines of code. So coming to a bit of a technical aspect of how to implement micro frontend, the main key in micro frontend is the integration between the host container and the micro frontends. So there are two ways to integrate micro frontend. One is the build time integration, and the second one is the runtime integration. Now, in build time integration, what happens is the container will install the components as libraries, similar to the libraries as we install while doing npm install. Also, the size of the final package is big because it contains all the dependencies. Moreover, we have to deploy again if there are any changes in the dependencies. Also, one of the last thing that there is a tight coupling between the container and all the micro frontend in the build time integration implementation of micro frontend. The next is the runtime integration. Now, runtime consists of three things, three composition, which is the server-side composition, edge-side composition, and client-side composition. Server-side, as the name suggests, that all the functionality will reside in the backend, and the backend decides which micro frontend to load. Edge-side is similar, just that instead of a backend, our CDN will decide on this which micro frontend to load. And the last one, which is the client-side composition. So in the client-side composition, a container is built and deployed separately. Okay. Each micro frontend can be exposed as a separate package that the container or host can fetch as needed. The container and the micro frontends are completely decoupled. They do not share the build or deployment and can use different technologies. One of the important factor or important feature of micro frontend. And the last one, the container can decide the version of micro frontend to deploy. So we're talking about micro frontend, but recently there was this plugin, which is one of the most important plugin to implement micro frontend, which is the module federation plugin of Webpack 5. This module federation plugin has helped us to in micro in micro frontend architecture. Webpack module federation plugin allows the JavaScript application to dynamically import code from another application at the runtime from different URLs. Now, this is something which is very amazing. And Webpack provides build time and runtime integration without the need for a server. It also tackles the code dependency and increases the bundle size by enabling dependency sharing. So, for example, by dependency sharing, I mean that if we are downloading a React component in our application, the application won't import the React code twice, and the module will smartly use the React source which was already downloaded and only import the component code. So this is a major feature which is blowing the minds of the developers right now. Moving so below, we have a calculation that we have the efficiency improvement of 97%. Moving on to the next step, which is the ID verification. So as I suggested, that ID verification is a crucial step and one of the most valuable and important as well. Existing process in our bank is manual, and it's more of a paper-based process which requires manual effort. As a solution, we have developed a microservice-based first of its kind solution to perform digital identity verification from the government tech repositories. Now, the benefit of this microservice is that we have successfully reduced the verification process timeline from 2 to 3 weeks to less than 2 minutes. I mean, within just a click, we are able to verify whether the document which have been provided by the entity is correct or not, all with the help of the microservice. Now, implementing this microservice, the entire process is now paperless and sustainable and is catering to the vision of speed, security, and sustainability of the organization. Let's discuss about microservices now. So, for many years, we have been thinking that single-tiered architecture were the dominant choices of building softwares and applications, and they worked really well as per the requirements. And there is nothing wrong with monoliths, and there are numerous success stories as well to prove it. However, in this talk, I will focus more on the multiple advantages microservices provide us, and I will also share some of our very own experiences while developing these microservices. So let me give a brief info of what a microservice is. So as the name suggests, again, microservice. So a microservice architecture is analogous to a manufacturing assembly line, wherein each microservice is like a station in the assembly line. And just as each station is responsible for just one specific task, a microservice is also expert in their given tasks, responsibilities, and is doing that same thing only. So this in turn promotes efficiency, consistency, and quality in the workflow and the outputs. So that was one of the very common example we provide to explain what microservice is. Now, benefits of microservice, let's say, first question which comes to anybody's mind is, well, developing a new feature in an application is how much impact will it create on the application's performance, and how much size increase will it create to my code base? So these two questions are one of the points which everyone takes into account when creating new features in the application. Same was the case for us as well. Our monolith was deployed in production, and when we were thinking of creating this ID verification, we had a similar discussions on to whether we should include the code in the monolith itself, or we should use a separate repository to code this in separate deployment cycles. So all these discussions, after all these discussions, we came to a conclusion that microservices would be the best to to proceed with these new features, since the monolith can work in parallel and the development work on the microservices can happen in parallel. The one of the important reason why we choose microservices was an independent deployment cycle. So a monolith microservice can be deployed independently apart from the monolith, and we can have multiple deployment cycles as well. Now, since the application was in the development stage, it is definitely possible that multiple tunings might be required, multiple capacity changes and CPU allocation changes will happen. So microservices were an ideal choice which came to our mind while developing the feature. Similarly, as a calculation of percentage efficiency improvement, we can say that from 2 weeks of manual time, which this identity verification used to consume, we were able to bring this down to less than 2 minutes. So it's about 99.99% efficiency improvement. Now, coming to the next step of the onboarding, which are the signatures. So as we know, signature is one of the important thing to verify the authenticity of any document. And integration of e-signatures in the process had created a biggest impact in our client journey, as it has completely digitized the document signing process. Prior to this e-sign, the process which we used to follow was fill the forms on the online portal, print them, sign them, scan them, and upload them back. That's a major hassle, and it required a lot of manual effort as well as, it required multiple steps. So, while thinking about a solution for this, we thought to create a single one-click signing solution, which would not only help the users, the entities which we are onboarding, but in fact help our internal employees as well, and reduce a lot of paper wastage, which is happening due to just the process of printing the documents and signing them, scanning them, and uploading them. So this paper signing process, this whole process used to take around 2 weeks. So a turnaround time of 2 weeks was there when the document was going from us to the client, and it used to come back to us after signing. So by this integration of digital signatures, we have reduced this 2 weeks turnaround time to less than 2 minutes. And the effort has been drastically reduced. Let's say now the user just have to press a button to e-sign the documents and place the signatures, and the documents are e-signed. So this is the level of improvement which you're talking about, that from 2 weeks to less than 2 minutes, which is almost 99.9% efficiency improvement. This seamless integration of software as a service processes like e-sign is done by microservices again. Now one more thing which comes in mind when we are using microservices is, when we are using a Java-based monolith application, is that how do we get the size of that Java-based monolith application smaller? So to reduce the size of the monolith, what is an ideal solution now is to use a microservice. So a microservice is very similar to, you can say, a monolith, but it's very small. So that is a microservice. Now moving on to the future state and process analysis, which is the pipeline flow when we are using the micro frontend and 2 microservices for our onboarding processes. We have compared the waiting times for all this, which is like the first step was client giving us the information. Then using that small amount of information, we initiate the onboarding to gather more information. This is filling up of data and is improved by micro frontend. Now, once the full information is gathered and the onboarding is moved to the next step, the important step of digital identity and verification. So the difference between then and now is then it was paper and now it is digital. So the digital identity and verification, which is happening through authenticated sources with just one click, is happening. And now we can see that the wait time of identity verification is less than 2 minutes. Once the digital identity and verification is completed, we move on to the next step, which is the digital signatures. Digital signatures, as we have discussed in the last slide, we have reduced the wait time of this step also from 2 weeks to less than 2 minutes, which is one of the which we can tell as a huge improvement in the pipeline process steps. Now, finally, once the digital signing is completed, we move on to close the onboarding, and uh, internal processes of the organization comes into picture then. So this was the comparison between the future state analysis and the present state analysis of our pipeline. And in the next slide, we will conclude by showing our results and analysis of the same. So as identified during the value stream mapping process, the prospect modification was taking 6 weeks because of an external dependency. So by curbing that external dependency and introducing micro front end, we were able to bring this 6 weeks to 1 week. And it was a significant one, pardon me, 6 weeks to 1 day. Next step was the data identity and verification from 2 weeks to less than 2 minutes. Next was the digital signatures, which were again 2 weeks of lag time to 2 minutes. Overall, we can say that improvement in the value chain efficiency has been about 99.19% for this onboarding process. Now, I would just like to add upon to these data with the numbers as well, that due to these various digital measures which we have used, our digital onboarding adoption rate has doubled from 17% to 34% globally in the year 2021. So not only we are just creating impact in the developer's life, we can say, we are also helping the bank and the organization grow. This was the, now summarizing the talk, I would just like to highlight once again on the micro front end and microservices, which have helped us improve a lot on the process timelines. And it has not only helped decrease the manual effort and manual errors which used to happen, these digital technologies have enabled us to perform speedy verification, data verification, speedy digital signatures, and has also allowed us to bring the changes to the market in speed. So with that, I would like to thank you all for being a patient listener, and I would also like to thank all my team members on behalf of whom I'm presenting. Thank you.